being and living in Ann Arbor, I should have a bias here, but we have none of those biases here on this channel. We just watching the players, putting our grades, seeing where they should land. And today we got Cameron McGrone from Michigan, good old Ann Arbor, go blue. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And we have an interesting guy here, right? Just kind of hopping right into the background. What you're going to see immediately is not only a small sample size out of McGrone, right? That's a concern in its own right. 16 total games played at Michigan. But even more so, the fact for the small sample size, or the reason behind it, I guess I should say, was a torn ACL, right, against Rutgers on November 21st. So, Mike, you got to be concerned not only over the small sample size, but also the fact that we haven't seen him since, right? Mike, what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Again, he had the ACL, and now he's coming in the draft. I think that's a definite concern. We just looked at Dylan Moses. He had an ACL injury, but we saw him come back from it. So we kind of saw what we're going to see after the injury. Can he progress from it? Was there any changes from previous film? For McGrone, we don't know that, and especially probably jumping the gun a little bit, but he is a little bit twitchier of a linebacker, a little bit more speed, quickness, and it's hard to say if that is that going to take a hit. We're not sure at this point. So definitely concerned. And then from there wasn't a huge sample size before then, and nothing really stood out to me, at least watching the film beforehand. So that offers, it's a concern in its own.
Yeah, no, certainly highly questionable there. I know in terms of the pro day numbers, didn't participate outside of bench, did 20 reps, which 6 foot 234. I would say that's definitely a positive number. Didn't maybe necessarily see that on film, but I think it is what it is, right? In terms of my overall grade, first thing you're going to see, obviously, range in pursuit and 11. I think that he didn't quite have the long speed nor sort of that short quickness on a consistent basis that we've seen out of the other guys. I know Mike said he's a twitchy athlete. He most certainly is. I just wish that we would have seen him twitching more often, I guess you could say, because it didn't really feel like he was utilizing that quickness and change of direction ability on a play-to-play basis, right? It was very inconsistent in that regard. In terms of coverage, similarly inconsistent. I would say much like Nick Bolton a couple videos back. Obviously, if you haven't seen that one, click the link above our head, but could get into the right position, right? Say a running back out of the backfield is running an angle route or an option route, could get in the right position. But then once that running back went horizontally or cut diagonally, he'd be toast, right? Just didn't really have, at least in my opinion, the change of direction skills to keep up with them and really react from there. And you also see that in the IQ and awareness grade. One of the lower ones I've given. I hope people don't see IQ 7.75 out of 15 and think, oh, he's just some big dummy. I'm not saying that, right? I'm talking about the reactionary quickness. I'm talking about your ability to have spatial awareness, play recognition, read your keys, and react appropriately, right? Have no idea how smart or unintelligent he may or may not be. But just on the football field between the lines, I thought that there were some question marks there because a lot of times, sort of like Nick Bolton, you'd see him just getting caught in the wash and not really making correct reads, or sometimes no reads at all, right? There were some plays where he was just kind of sitting back and not really doing much of anything. And, if you're going to invest a day one, day two pick in a linebacker, I think that you need to see a little bit more out of him in that regard. Otherwise, block shedding, as I kind of passed over that, 9 out of 15. I felt he was solid, particularly as a blitzer. He would be able to use that sort of downhill quickness to beat running backs and various offensive linemen if they didn't get a good angle on him. But once they got hands on, he was for the most part dead in the water. So I would say maybe better than a couple of the guys, Baron Browning by example, but not, again, to the caliber of the rest. Otherwise, I thought he was all right as a finisher and tackler in terms of once he got in position to make the play, but it was just getting there that was sometimes the problem, as well as a sometimes on and off motor, I will say. I think I noticed him sort of quitting on plays a little bit more often than some of the other guys. And maybe that was just because he got himself so far out of position off that initial read that there really wasn't any point in continuing on from that point. But overall, then 3.5 out of size, 4 out of athleticism, which again is kind of a projection because I would say he was a good athlete generally, but after the ACL, there's question marks there. So overall comes out to a 65, maybe a little bit lower than I would have expected going in just based off what I've heard kind of surrounding his name. But Mike, thoughts on the grade? Too high, too low? Where are you at?
Man, with these linebackers, I feel like me and you, other than Nwosu Parsons, there was a little argument debate there, but I'm right with you. I think this is the first really prospect in the linebacker category that I question if I really see, is he going to stick around at the next level? I think there's question marks there. I can see the potential, but by no means do I think it's a guarantee. I think the rest of them, I can see a spot for them in the next level, and I think they're going to do pretty well. This one I question. For me, he kind of sits on the border of, where is his value at the next level? I think, obviously, by no means I think he's a starter come day one. I think there's just proficiencies and basically not proficiencies, deficiencies in most categories. I think there's a lot to work on. So, can he start as a backup linebacker and maybe eventually work his way into rotation and then, go from there? Sure. I think special teams is going to be, I think, a big thing for him starting off. I think that's where, if he can make his mark there, keep himself on the roster, and then, move up from there. I don't know. I just didn't see anything that really stuck out to me. And I think we've seen some prospects that were, well-rounded, but nothing really, stood out. And Dylan Moses or
Nick Bolton.
And I just think they offer a lot more in most, if not all, categories. So I think 65, right where I'd be. Maybe I'm even a little bit lower on them.
That's interesting. And then, kind of taking that into the big board, adding into the position premium. And what you have there is, at least in my opinion, judging by, sort of who we've rated at this point, what I would say is sort of an early fourth round guy. So that early day 3 category. I know one guy that Mike and I were decently high on a couple years back that kind of went in a similar spot, actually to our own Detroit Lions, was Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who I would say we were certainly higher on than we are McGrone. He was just a little bit further along in the process. I think sort of a similar career trajectory, right? Where that first year, maybe second year, is primarily on special teams and maybe occasionally getting some rotational reps. And then you're going to try and insert him into a more play-to-play role. And then it's going to be time to see whether he sinks or swims. I don't think that you're going to be able to day one insert him into your starting lineup and expect him to make a difference. I think if you do that, he's most likely going to sink, right? And especially coming off the ACL tear, you may or may not have to even redshirt him this first year, right? Obviously, that's not a part of the grade. Like I've said now multiple times, we're not doctors. So, if you're concerned about that, additionally, we could even see him even lower than that 67.28. But I think an interesting prospect nonetheless, just in terms of maybe finding a role and crafting a role for him. But I agree in large part with Mike that a probably developmental linebacker, definitely a backup one at the beginning at least. And I don't quite see the day 2 hype that is surrounding McGrone, at least in my opinion. Mike, you're shaking your head. Thoughts?
Totally agree. I don't see it. Every one of these linebackers, I think, I take over them. Like, I don't think there's any debate. There's no really conversation to be had. Then even some of the players, that we have there above him in that, kind of that third round grade, McNeil, Wilson, Basham, I think I'd take their potential over really what I saw from McGrone. So, no, I'm right there with you.
And it's a little bit tougher because obviously sort of grading from the top down on a lot of these positions, we haven't filled up that fourth round, right? So it's kind of tough to know sort of who he's in that same caliber of, or even really the bottom half of the third round. As you'll see there, there's still some room to be had there. But I do think that he's an interesting prospect, like I said. One that I'll be interested to see where he goes, no question, because again, I believe on CBS Sports, he was in their top 100 prospects. Otherwise, I've seen people saying, hey, we should take him in the second round, that he's similar to, say, Josh Uche, by example, a former Michigan Wolverine. I don't see that in any way. He's more of a traditional linebacker. He's more of a Mike linebacker. Really only times that I thought he showed any real proficiencies, as Mike said, was sort of when he was blitzing, right? I thought he did that relatively well. But again, that's just because that downhill quickness, and that's in a design gap for the most part, right? That's a design play. If you gave any of the linebackers above him that similar play design, I think they would yield very similar results, right? I don't think that there's very much that he was necessarily creating out there. Not saying that he can't. He certainly could develop into a better prospect and player with his sort of athletic tools, but there's going to be some work that needs to be done, no question. So, Mike, you got anything else or what?
Not on McGrone, but if you want to see this channel develop into, a bigger channel, what you guys can do is like this video, comment if you agree with us on McGrone or disagree. We like to hear it. And then, subscribe. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers. That'd be an exciting little milestone. We're getting there. I think at 84, be our 85th, make everything special. And then, we're going to keep doing this. We like doing this. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video so far. So, Mike, anything else with that?
No, I mean, by the time this video goes up, hopefully we're at 85, 86, 87. Maybe you could be 88, 89, or 90, right? But no, with that being said, I think we're mic'd up. Now we're micing out. Peace, guys.
Doses.